Yo, what is going on today, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Today's video will be the ultimate God tier list for the end of Season 10. This will be good all the way into Season 11 and potentially into Season 11 unless there's just like an absolutely massive change to the map and a bunch of gods and a bunch of items. This will be the tier list for a good long while. I'm not going to be editing it out of this. And this will be good for at least a month and a half, 40 days, something like that. We're going to be going through every god, talking about why they're good, why they're not good, and what tier I think they're in. So let's just start it off. Starting with Achilles. I actually think with the axe change, I think gods like Achilles can be pretty good solo laners. Final K put him in as his one of his top 5 warriors. I think he lanes well. Late game, he's one of the few warriors that doesn't completely fall off because he has execute. And then he also has his 2 for protections. His laning phase is safe. His farming is pretty bad, but I don't think it matters that much. Agni. I think Agni's slightly above average right now. I would not expect to see too much Agni for a bit because I think there is like 5 to 10 mages that are like quite a bit better than him, but I still think he's fine. I think there are reasons to pick him. He has a solid early game, solid mid game. His late game is good. He does have some counters though. Opwash after his nerf, I think is going to stay in just slightly above average. I wouldn't be too surprised if we actually continued seeing Opwashes in mid. I do think he's nearly dead, if not completely dead in solo, but I still think in mid, as a late game hyper carry, he's insane. On Muzen Cobb, I think he's in a pretty bad spot right now. His build is okay, but his laning phase is not great. He gets outranged by a lot of the mages right now, and overall, I don't think there's a ton of reasons to play him. He is a very strong late game god, but it's hard to get there. Alma, I think Alma's incredible. I think she is the best solo laner in the game right now. Good early game, good mid game. She scales, good on objectives, very few weaknesses. She can farm. She's very safe. She maybe falls off like hyper late game, but every warrior does. But I think she is incredible. On her, with Chernobog's nerf, this might be a bold call. With Chernobog's nerf, I think On Her is the best hunter in the game. I think his weakness as a late game hunter is known, but I think with how OP hunters are, I think it does not matter because he still gets that extra 10% auto damage in the late game. He's still going to be critting you. He's still going to be just destroying you. And that doesn't include how dominant his early game is and how insane his mid game is. Anubis, I actually think Anubis is in a pretty good spot right now. Yes, Typhon's just got nerfed. Yes, that hurts him, but I don't think it matters. I think a lot of gods aren't building too much anti-heal right now. Yes, Divine's getting built, but a lot of junglers don't want to build brawlers. If you force them into brawlers or if you force the enemy mid laner into Divine, you still have near one-shot potential onto anybody, even tanks. And then Wrap forces beads very easily. If you have a support that can kind of play with you, GG's, you'll be great. I hate Ao Kwang, but I don't think he's that great right now. I very rarely see him. I think his build is whatever. Could I see him getting played? Maybe. I think there's just a lot more gods I'd rather have on my team, but I still would not want to play against him just because I think he's so annoying. Aphrodite, I think Aphro's the best support in the game right now. Nerfs to Athena. A couple of the supports are still really good, but I think Aphrodite, like, this is one of the best dual lanes in the game currently. On her, Aphrodite, good kill potential. He makes her good in laning phase when she's already just solid. Comes to dominant laning phase, and then late game, she makes him invincible and can kind of just 2v5 with him. Apollo's not good. So many better hunters. Weak laning phase. Bad ult still, even if the mana is a little bit better. Pretty weak at most points. Yes, he scales eventually as a hunter, but then even late game, Apollo's one of the easiest hunters to dive, in my opinion. Arachne, I think Arachne's in a slightly above average spot right now. Her ability to solo objectives, I think, is really underrated because I think that's how you need to win games currently, is just doing objectives. Fighting does very little. There is such a easy comeback potential if you get shut down. Like, if you're 5-0 and you go for an objective and you lose that objective, yeah, it's about 1,000 gold swing, but it's whatever. You can back up. You can go farm your own stuff. If you die, however, though, when you're 5-0, it's about 1,000 gold swing and you're off the map not farming for a bit. So I think PvP is really bad currently, even though it's like not that bad. It's just bad if you can get shut down. And PvE is just so broken. Ares is a counter pick because I think solid. I just think there are not too many gods that he's great into. I also think he is one of the worst, if not the worst support late game. Like, there is so many supports I would take over him. But I do think he's fine. Artemis, I think Artemis is still pretty bad. Same as Apollo. Mediocre laning phase. Late game, she can be kind of scary. But even then, so easy to put her behind. So easy to kill her mid game. A lot of the gods right now just poke her out and kind of just out-trade her. Audio stinks. She's supposed to win laning phase, and she doesn't even win laning phase right now. Athena, I think Athena's still really good, especially in ranked, but I think her strength has fallen off so much that I can't put her above B. I think she still does what she does well. She's a decent engage god. She's got global, but her like 3v3 scuffles outside of just her dash taunt are just not good. Atlas, I think Atlas is in a pretty solid spot. Again, he is a non-CC immune guardian, so he's riskier in the late game. But I think his ult is so busted. It is crazy. They buffed it. On objectives, his fight is really strong. His 1-2-3 is very good zone potential and just chase down. I'm a fan of Atlas. So Myth doesn't yell at me. I'll put a Willix in B. More of a counter pick. I think she is better now because I think a lot of junglers are just in that like A to C range. I don't think any hunter is like incredible, but I also don't think most of them are bad. So I'm going to put a Willix in B. Baba, I think Baba's still incredible. Fantastic late game. Just wants to farm early and mid. But late game, she's probably one of the best mages, if not like top 3. Bacchus, I think Bacchus is fine. I think you just have to build him like uber tank. I'm talking like double stack, Pridwin, Sentinel, stuff like that. And then you can be just a big harassing tool late game. But you still just feel like you get shredded. I think his laning phase is good. He's got some good counter picks, but he's also got some picks that really make it hard for him to play. Baka is so bad. He can't dive late game because he just gets one shot by everything. His mid game is fine, but he just revolves around like farming. His objective damage is fine, but even then it's not like that great. His like 2v2s and 3v3s early game are pretty bad until he gets ult. He does spike pretty hard from like level 5 to like 15, but even then, why are you playing him? This is a prediction for Bake. I think Bake's in a good spot. I think he wins a lot of laning phases. I think his late game is very strong too because he is a guardian that basically can just build protections and he's good. So I think he's in an A spot, but I'd have to play him a lot more, feel his matchups, but I'm just going to stick him in A for now. Baron, I cannot bring myself to like Baron currently. I think he's fine in support. He's fine in mid. He's fine in solo, but I don't think he's great in any of them. And I think he's closer to bad than he's closer to good in all those roles, especially when you're considering the meta. Bastet, I think Bastet's pretty bad. I think she maybe sees some play in solo lane. I would not be surprised actually if we saw like a Bastet meta maybe come from solo, because I think Jotun's is in a very strong spot, but I think her jungling is pretty bad, but I don't think it's like terrible. Bologna, okay, this might be a bold call, but I would not be surprised if we have a Bologna meta. If Bologna's played at like Worlds or she just gets played a lot in ranked, I would not be too surprised. You need ways to stop ADC's damage late game, and like her and a few other gods we'll touch on later do that. And so I think I'm going to put her in A. Cabrakan, I think Cabrakan is so bad right now. I think he's got some decent matchups, so I'll put him in D. I won't put him in trash tier, but I do think that this is not a good Cabrakan meta. It's not good in solo. In support, he can get a lead. Even when it comes to mid-game, he just gets killed. Kama, I think Kama's fine. Some good counter picks. Some guys he's not too great into. But I do think it's a strength that he's one of the best assassins into Maman because he just wins a lot of 1v1s against her. Yeah, I don't have too much to say on him. Serb, I think Serb is crazy right now. I actually think Serb is the best Guardian solo. Obviously, we'll have to see how Bake is in Season 11. But I think he is a crazy good solo laner currently. I think Tainted is still very strong. I think his passive is insane. I think his ult is still a little lackluster, but I think the 2-1 combo is crazy good. Cern, as much as I love Cern, I'm going to put him in slightly below average. I think he's better than these two, but I don't think it's by enough to put him up a tier. Like in this tier, I think there is too many hunters, and in this tier, there is also going to be a lot of hunters. I think Onher's just going to be like a case of he is just so much better than his counterparts. Chalk, guys, play Chalk right now. Redstone Chalk it's so good. Very strong laning phase. He dives well late game because he reduces the enemy's attack speed with both Redstone and his 3. He also is just so tanky to deal with. Can't lose laning phases. Very hard to gank. Chalk is strong. Chang'e, if you enjoy Chang'e, look away. She is so bad. She has turned into like this one-shot blink mage with Mirrodin. And while it's good late game, getting to that point is just a stress. And then when you get to late game, you're a mage with no Aegis. So if you do get like blinked on or something, you have a chance of getting one shot. And then it just becomes like, can you one shot before getting one shot? And I think it's just so risky that with how bad her early and mid game is, it's not worth the payoff. Charon, I think Charon is a really good support right now. Very few weaknesses, strong laning phase, strong mid game, strong late game. Builds War Flag, has good chase potential, has good peel. A lot of his stuff he doesn't do great. He just does a bunch of things good. Charybdis, I'm going to put her in F. Bad ult. The 3 is just strange. If it was a little bit more instant where you could actually get underground, or every ability that made you immune wasn't instant, so hers didn't feel just so much worse, I would move her up. But because of those two reasons, I can't put her above F. She uses like Kins and Odibo a little bit better now. Animosity if you ever build that. Her 1 and her 2 are very strong abilities, but bro, her 3 and alt, I can't. Bog, I think Bog is still strong. I do think teams are starting to realize how they need to beat him. And I do think in ranked, he is going to be better than like SPL because of just the global presence. But the mitigation you get when you land in is not as good as it used to be. Like the movement speed, the attack speed on your 2, like a lot of his utility and a lot of his like stats that he gets through his kit have just been nerfed a lot. I still think he's solid. I still think he's good. You're not trolling by picking him, but I definitely think he's worse than he was by a good long shot. Chiron, maybe a bold call. I think Chiron is here, and I think Chiron should be getting played. I think his build right now is the AMC build, which I think is maybe not great early game, and maybe mid game it's still not too strong. But late game, you have true one-shot potential with Chiron if your team is diving. And I think that is kind of what the meta has evolved into, is it's going to be warriors and assassins diving, trying to kill the enemy backline before your backline dies, instead of just trying to keep your backline alive. So I think Chiron will be really good in this meta. Chrono stinks. Chrono stinks. His ult is bad. His laning phase is bad. His late game is bad. There's too much damage in the game, so he can't get his ult off. Honestly, even taking like a half second or like a quarter of a second off of his ult timing would be so good for the character. There's so much burst in the game, you're just never able to use your ult late. Cleo, I think Cleo's pretty good. Some solo potential, some mid potential. So I think like flex potential is good. Does she play any of them great? I actually think she plays all 30 roles in a pretty great spot right now. Just not like top 5 in any role. Jotun's Vigor is insane right now, so she doesn't need Soul Eater. You can just go Jotun's into trance and then a bunch of damage, and she's very safe. Okay, I'll be honest. I have literally no idea where I'm going to put Cthulhu because I have not seen him played. That's a lie. I saw Nika play him one game and he looked fine. So that's what I'll rate him. I'll rate him fine. But this one could be the biggest miss in the entire tier list. He could be one of the best gods or one of the worst gods, and I've had no idea. Cucullin, I think Cucullin is good. I think he's in the same kind of spot as Achilles, as a solid laner who scales pretty well into the late game. Yes, he doesn't farm that great, but I think with how strong his build is in that late game and the engage potential he provides, I'm going to put him in A tier. Stupid! Slightly above average, I think. A lot of his weakness comes in his late game fights, but at that point it's kind of like on her, and his laning phase isn't as good as on hers, so he's just worse at all points than on her. But I still think he's like good at all points, so I think that's got something. Daji as a counter pick, S tier. As anything else, kind of like B, A tier. I'll put her in B tier because I do think she's around a Willix and Kama. Don't think she does anything more spectacular than them. Her ability to punish relics being down or teams not having CC immunity is through the roof, so you always got to consider that. Enza, but I'll put him in B tier. I think he's slightly above these gods. I think his passive is insane right now. His 3's been buffed. I do think his ult is still probably the weakest part of his kit, but his 1, 2, 3 passive are crazy good. Disco, I think Disco could be a sneaky pick with warriors back in solo lane, giving them an extra like 30 damage or 30 power late game. Makes their autos just do an extra 30. Their abilities all do an extra like 30. And then on top of that, it gives them an opportunity to win the laning phase. Or I guess I should say even more than that. It almost guarantees a winning laning phase. So yes, her as a god in the early game is not great. Mid game, meh. Late game, she's fine. And I think she does her job in the early game, which is helping one lane win. Erlang, B tier. I would not play this god in ranked, but I would play this god in competitive. You're just forcing relics, trying to force fights, trying to bully out enemies, whether it's the assassin, the mid, the solo, the duo lane. He can do that really well, but he kind of falls off late because he just kind of gets one shot by both junglers, or by both assassins and mid, or by both hunters and mid laners. I think he sets pretty above average right now. I do think she's just risky, which is where her weakness comes from. And I think her 1 taking so long is also not great. But her 2, 3 ults are still incredible. Faf, because of the meta, A tier. Go to objectives, burn them. Not great in laning phase, but not bad. Really good mid game. Probably one of the best supports late game, so A tier for Faf. Fenrir, I'm putting Fenrir in A tier. This god runs ranked games. Why isn't he played like every game? He's like Thanatos with being slightly more safe and just doing slightly less damage. But trading that out, he just does more utility. He can punish beads being down. He has so many good counter picks, like him into them. If I was a jungler and I jungled a lot, I would play a ton of Fenrir. Freya, I think Freya is pretty bad right now. Rings stink. Her build is not great right now. Typhon's just got nerfed. I would be baffled if we saw a Freya meta. Ganesh is A tier. Ganesh and Geb are A tier. Both have mediocre laning phases at best, but mid and late game, probably the best supports, like with Fafnir. Gilg, I think Gilg is so bad. He has some strengths, but for the most part, like there's just like a why play him when there's just other gods that can lane better, other gods that dive better late game, other gods that have better mid game rotations. I'm gonna actually put Guan down in C tier also because I think he's got the same problems where it's why play Guan. Hachiman A tier, very good, very safe, strong at every point. Not really OP at any point until late game, but then at that point you're a hunter, so being OP in late game is good. The scariness of playing against a Hachiman who's got his one active in the late game, he can crit you for like 500 from across the map, so yeah. Bold take. Hades is S tier. Dominates all the warriors, scales into the late game with a spectral and then just the tainted amulet, which gives him just a ton of protections of each. His ult then gives him another like 200, and then he can just one-shot you. Yes, Typhon's got nerfed a little bit. It doesn't really matter. He still just one-shots you late game. Hebo's not great. I still think his level 1/2 with Horn Shard is crazy good, but the ability to be killed early, mid, and late game is there. The lifesteal potential build is not great right now. It means he's kind of going to have to play like full glass cannon, and there's just not a great payoff. It's kind of like Chang'e, but slightly better early game. Heim's always going to be fine. The meta is crit right now, which makes him feel a little bit worse. But I think with warriors coming back in solo lane, the Kin's Heim build with maybe one crit item to force a spectral could feel pretty good. Hell, not great. Hell got nerfed super hard, and Afro kind of got nerfed hard, but not hard enough. She's kind of lived the nerfs, and Hell hasn't really. She's still a really great laner. Late game, she can have some strengths, but having no hard CC, no ability to engage is always just a bad feeling. Low key, Hera's an A tier god. Fine laner. She doesn't really like blow you away with how she lanes, but it's good enough. When you get to the late game portion, there are very few mages that can do what Hera does, which is like dive the enemy or peel her ADC with both damage and CC, which is kind of weird. Yes, her mid game is kind of weak, but if they have double warrior dive, you just build a breastplate and you're just unkillable. Herc's like right there in solo lane as just like a top 5 warrior solo lane. He's never really bad. I think late game he does fall off a tiny bit, but just the potential of like a blink pluck pulling a relic or a blink pluck just killing somebody who doesn't have beads is so good late game that even then he's an A tier. I'm not a fan of Horus. Yeah, he can win a lot of laning phases, but his ult isn't too useful right now. I think his 1, 2, 3 is okay. You can't really use him that well in ranked, and a lot of people know how to mitigate him in comp in laning phase, so C tier for him. Hu Yi, also C tier. Really bad laner, good 1v1er, but he doesn't feel threatening to dive, which is, I think, negative with him. So his real only strength is his 1v1 in the mid game, which is not enough. Bots will always be above average. Bots is fine. Ishtar, I think Ishtar's slightly above average. Ishtar, incredible laning phase god, really good in the mid game. Does fall off a bit late game because she's just a bit easier to dive than most other characters. Kind of has the same problem as Medusa where her dash just gets blocked. But even then, she has like kill threat, which is like faster than Medusa's. Medusa's is pretty slow because the ult is like a slowly timed ult turn. But I still think she's good enough in the early game to want to pick her. Ishel, she makes a lot of sense as a solo laner, but she doesn't really get played as a solo. And I think her mid laning is not great. I think she needs to build like a defense item. And you don't really see that much right now. And then if you build a defense item, your damage isn't really that high. So meh. Izanami dominates laning phase. Probably the worst late game hunter just because of no CC immunity. The ult isn't really good self peel in terms of CC. The dash is easy to track. So yeah. Janice, for ranked, I'm putting him in C. There's so much depth to this character that a lot of ranked players don't use. And I think that's what makes him such a bad ranked god. Because all of them just look to like ult the late game team fight and look to one shot somebody. But there's like stuff beyond that with like using your 3 for mobility, portaling your teammates, playing like a jungler almost at some points. And ranked players just don't really do that. Jingwei, I think Jing's fine right now. Kind of the exact opposite of Izza and Ishtar. Not great early, but one of the best hunters in the late game. A lot of safety. I do think her early game is maybe a bit underrated right now. And I think the build that's happening with arrow into devs, crit, kins, I think that build would work really well for her. So B tier for her. Yorm, I think Yorm is slightly not great. He dominates lane, yes. But when the game goes late, I would not want to Yorm from solo lane. Unless he builds like damage. And then at that point, I'd rather just have like a Hades or something. Can he win lane? Yes. Do I care that much? Not really. Kali, just because she's such a good late game hyper carry, I'll put her in C tier, but I would not want to play this character because you have to just hope your team doesn't lose you the game. But if you do go late, she's a hyper carry. Khepri, same tier as Geb and Ganesh, except slightly better early game and slightly worse late game, but still incredible. King Arthur. I know Fine put this character as top 5 warrior, but I am not convinced of Arthur. I've not thought Arthur's been a great god for a while, and I still don't think he's that good. I think he's fine currently, but late game, an Arthur diving, unless he's got like just a blink big ult, I'm just not scared at all. Cuckoo farms well, very safe, can build breastplate, late game hyper carry, one-shot potential, low cooldown on his one. Yeah, just crazy character. Kumba stinks. Kuzumbo, I'm putting in A tier. I will not be told any longer that Kuzumbo is not a very good character. Winnable laning phase, which is I think a little underrated, but then he is such a nuisance late game. He is so tanky. He returns a lot of damage. He won't really one-shot you, but he'll get you very low, and then you'll just an easy cleanup for his teammates. Lance, I don't like Lance. I think Lance is a bad jungler, bad solo laner. I think he has elements of both solo and jungle, but does neither of them outright well. I think Loki is great right now. I think we could see a Loki meta at Worlds and in Ranked. I think his one getting that extra damage in the early game makes his 1v1 potential so much higher. And the late game, he is a menace. Maman, do I think she's like must ban, must nerf? No. Is she one of the best characters in the game? Yes. Marty, I don't think Marty's very great. Kind of like Chiron, except worse early game, worse mid game, and worse late game. Closer to AMC. Like, it's like AMC with slightly more safety. Maui, if you're playing Maui in Ranked, he's like C tier, but I'm going to put him in B just because I think if you're queuing with somebody, he's B tier. And I think a lot of you queue with others, so I'm going to put him in B tier. Good laning phase, good mid game. Falls off a bit late game, but he still has the threat with the ult, so I think he's still going to be fine. Medusa, I don't think is very good. She's gotten buffs, but still a pretty weak laner. Late game, she falls off a lot. Her 1v1 potential can be good into a lot of characters, but it also can be really bad into others. Mercury, B tier, hyper carry, one-shot potential, really good objectives, but the enemy will go spectral. Usually your hunter's going spectral or going crit too, so there's going to be a lot of spectral value. Diving late game is very difficult. Usually you want to just split push and just look to 1v1, but because of how much damage is in the game, most assassins have just as close of one-shot potential to you as you do to them. Maybe you have slightly more, but it's still very close, so we'll put him in B tier. Merlin, I think Merlin's pretty bad. Very weak early game, kind of just wants to farm. When it goes late, yes, he can still be good, but there's so many more mages that just do so many things better than him. He's still a fun character though. Morgan, I think Morgan is great. Maybe S tier. I just think you compare her to Cuckoo and it's just night and day how OP Cuckoo is. So I think that's what maybe brings her down a bit, but she's still very strong. A lot of self peel makes her very unique amongst mages in the late game. She also has got some pretty decent range with her abilities. Mulan, A. Mulan is sick now. I really think she is an incredible character. I don't think she is dominant, but I think she is good enough at all points that I would like Mulan on my team in most ranked games. And it's very hard to lose lane with this character. I mean, very hard. Naja, Mickey Mouse character right now. Very few weaknesses. It's mostly just if he doesn't have ult, he can be pretty vulnerable. But even then, you have movement speed from your 1, movement speed from your passive, invulnerability with the 3, healing with the 2, good 1v1 potential even outside of that. And then you just set up for mages late game and you pull relics really easily. So yeah, I think Naja's incredible. Neith is bad. Neith has like a 7-second speed arrow or something like that, and she still feels horrible. Yeah, D tier. Nem, I think Nem is in a good spot right now. Do I think she's the best jungler in the game? I like go back and forth with her and Naja with who I like more. I think in ranked, I like Naja's CC a bit more, so I'm going to put Nem in A tier. But I still think Nem is very, very strong. She isn't like that late game hyper carry anymore, but she still is very good because she has good 1v1 potential. And I think it's not even troll to build like a Spectral if you are diving the enemy ADC late game or building some defense like a Magi's maybe. But yeah, very strong early game. Her abilities are such low cooldowns that she has like good chase potential and stuff. I think she's good. Hey, low key, Nike's solid. Nike's really solid. I think her weakness of being like a boring character is actually a downside for her. So a lot of people don't like playing her, but it also gives her like the upside of not a lot of people play against her, so they don't really know what she does. She's one of the best Runeforge users in the game, best binding users. Spikes, if they were decent, she would be good at them. Her laning phase is incredibly safe. You don't see much, if any, Sunder right now, so it only really threatens the erosion, and that's still only like the support, and that's like 3rd item minimum. So like 20 minutes into the game until you're actually getting countered by like anti-shield. Nox, I don't know if she's very good right now. I think mages in general outside of Afro in support are pretty bad, and I don't think she's a good mid laner. Nuwa is sneaky good right now. I think her build is solid. She actually has pretty good early game. The minions are a heavily underrated part of her kit in terms of tanking objectives or tanking towers or tanking buffs. She doesn't farm great, but I think that's fine with how strong her late game is. Odin, I think Odin is pretty bad still. Weak laner. Yes, he scales into the late game, but I don't even think he scales that well. He's not like an unkillable machine or anything. And if you go like an unkillable Odin build, your farm is so bad. Olo is not good. Same type of problems as Freya. Rings are bad. Typhons is bad. Yes, he can win laning phase. And if you want to be like a crutch laning phase winning player, you can pick Olo. But I think Osiris is actually pretty okay right now. He scales into the late game because of his passive and his 3. He has very little threat in terms of damage, but I still think he's good enough that I will put him in B just because of him being capable of diving backlines late game just to slow them down and soak up some damage. Pele, slightly above average. Very strong early game, very strong mid game. Not too great late game. A lot of times she just kind of gets one shot. Also, she punishes relics being down pretty well, but outside of that, if relics are up, she has a somewhat hard time killing unless she can force out like their dash. It's weird. I don't think she's that great. Purse, slightly below average, but fine. Safe laner. Scales pretty well into the late game. Decent one-shot potential. Punishes beads. No beads, so if the enemy support doesn't really buy beads, you can maybe exploit that. Poseidon, after his nerfs, I'm putting him in C. He was a bad mid laner last patch, and then they killed his solo lane build. So yeah, he is in a bad spot. I think Raw's fine. I think he's slightly above average. Good laner, has ultimate one-shot potential late game, has secure objectives, farms very well. It's like a better / healthier version of Janice in ranked. Raijin, I still think this character is incredible, but I think he's a mid laner, not a solo laner anymore. Safe, very hard to deal with, a lot of damage. Ultimate is broken, and then he still has a lot of cooldowns, even though they kind of changed it from being like the passive every 4 abilities. His autos give him cooldown reduction. Rom, same tier as Hachiman, just not on her, but very few weaknesses, scales in the late game, and the ultimate is so busted. It is crazy. Rama ult is actually busted. Nutman, we'll put in B tier. The nerf to his 3 hurts a lot of his damage. His damage feels like it's very low now on the 3, even with the stun acorn. But I still think global potential is there. Can dominate early games and can just bring his team to a massive lead. Robin, he is so close to having one-shot potential late game, even dealing with Aegis. I just think he is barely too weak late game for how just kind of average his early game is. Scylla, I'm not a fan of Scylla right now. Her late game is fine, yes, but her early game isn't too great. Her mid game is whatever, and you play her for the late game, but her late game right now is just not as good as like Mirrodin mages. So I'm not a huge fan of her. Serket, I think Serket is a underwhelming assassin right now. Does she have potential? Yes. She's one of the best assassins into Thanatos. She has very good matchups into like Ao Kuang and some other assassins, but there's just very few reasons to play her in my opinion. Low-key, I think Set's in a pretty good spot right now. I think Set was OP before they nerfed him, and now he's just balanced, but a lot of people just don't want to play him. Sigil's still insane. His build is still crazy good. Just takes a little bit longer to get online. Bold take, Shiva's in a good spot. I got my ass handed to me in a ranked game last Wednesday. I don't know when I'm putting this video out, but last Wednesday, Shiva just destroyed me mentally, physically, emotionally, that I have to respectfully put him in A tier and tell you guys about our Lord and Savior Shiva. Still a very horrible ultimate, but the 1, 2, 3 in the early game is pretty good. Scotty stinks. Charybdis would be the worst hunter in the game if Scotty wasn't here. Sobek, I think Sobek's fine. I think he's a little overrated currently. Luck reliant and has some anti-heal. But outside of that, there's nothing about Sobek that's like, Sobek. Sol, I'll put Sol slightly above Olo and Freya because I think she doesn't need the rings, but she's still not very good. Wukong, a slightly worse Alma, but he is just worse. And I think I would still play him. I would want Nike over Wukong, but he is still in a very good spot. Surtur, low key. Surtur's him too. Same like level as Shiva. Very strong laning phase. Maybe doesn't scale that great, but he's still an intimidating laning phase god. And if he gets ahead, he does have like significant one-shot potential until the ADC one-shots you late game. Susano, this character can't be weak. Damage, CC, a lot of dashes, chase potential, escape potential, above average. Not great, not like pretty strong, not OP, but he is above average. Sylve, The change to him was nice, but there's so much damage in the game right now. Unless you guaranteed need to win dual lane or you lose, I wouldn't play Sylve. Terra, slightly worse. Geb, Ganesh, Khepri, Fafnir, it's like slightly worse than them. But I think she's still better than the above average tier. Thana, I've complained about him on my streams. I've complained about him in videos. Thana. Morgan, I'll put her in above average because she can transform late game into just an OP character. She also has just like poly one-shot potential. But I'm not in love with her right now. With Rat's nerf, I actually think Thor's a better Rat. I think in previous patch, Rat with the Stun Acorn had one-shot potential. Don't think it really does anymore, so I like Thor's utility with the wall. Wants to get the Jotuns online, but as soon as he gets the Jotuns online, incredible. Thoth, busted. Is like Cuckoo, except slightly worse in the slightly worse farming. But in every other scenario, I think Thoth is probably better. Tiamat, I think Tia's pretty bad. Bad early game character, and her late game doesn't have like the payoff because she can't really dive the enemy backliners because they just outrange her or they just outtrade her when she jumps in. I think Tsukiyomi after his buffs feels pretty good. Oh, buff, I guess I should say, just to knock him on the 2. I also think the positive is Jotun's Vigor is in a pretty good spot, and I think he uses that item really well. Tier, he's good. Good laner, but I'm not super into Tier. Uller stinks. Vamana is so bad. I think Vulcan is slightly above average. I just wouldn't play him because he's kind of like these secure mages, but just a lot worse. Less safe, in my opinion. Maybe he farms better than both of them just because of how low his cooldowns are, but even then, I don't care. X-Ball, I'll put him slightly above like Apollo Art, Hu Yi, certain tier, but it's barely. I think he's closer to these 3. Xing Chen is bad. Yamoja is not very good right now. Ymir is not very good right now. Yu Long is not very good right now. Zeus is not very good right. Okay, the last 6 characters are just all not great. Xing Chen just has the problem where he has no strengths. Yamoja is very high skill cap. If you are good with her, you can move her up if you want, but such a high skill cap. Ymir dies late game. Yes, Wall is still OP, but a lot of times Phantom Shell just gets forced and then that's kind of it. And then he just gets one shot late game. His landing phase is fine though. Yu Wong doesn't have the payoff of a late game hypercarry mage and he's not exceptionally good in the farming department or the early game. So meh. Zeus is too easy to kill at all points. Also doesn't have like a payoff of being like uber insane at any point. And Zhong, we'll put Zhong in C tier because I do think he's tiny bit underrated. I think he just farms pretty poorly, but his 1v1 and his 1v2s and 2v2s and 3v3s are pretty solid. But yeah, that's the ultimate tier list for the rest of season 10 or season X. If you guys have any questions, drop them down below. If you guys have any comments about anything, who do you guys think is the best god in the game currently? For my money, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say Thanatos is the best god in the game right now. Nerf Thanatos. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you guys again next time. Peace.